Hello, students, and welcome to your last investigation in the last book of our 6th grade advanced math class. Guys, you've almost made it. If you're not on page 86, please get there right now. Today, we're going to talk about something called histograms. And as we talk about histograms today, I want you to think about the similarities and differences between histograms and bar graphs because they are very similar. Okay, let's continue. Traveling to school, histograms. A middle school class studied the times that students woke up in the morning. They found that 2 students woke up almost an hour earlier than the others. The class wondered how much time it took each student to travel to school in the morning. The table below shows the data they collected. So if you look at the data, they have the initials of the student, travel time, how long it took them to go from home to school, the distance traveled in miles, and the mode of transportation. They're not talking about the mode, which means most. They're actually talking about what they used to get there, whether it's busing, whether they walked, we used a car, etc., etc. Based on the data, what 3 questions do you think the class asked? How might the class have collected the data? And what information would a line plot of the data give you? A bar graph. Well, let's take a look at some of these questions more in depth. So I'm going to move on to page 87. It says you can draw a histogram to display data in the table. A histogram is a graph that organizes numerical data into intervals. Okay, so remember I asked you that question about a minute ago. What are some differences between bar graphs and histograms? Well, here's one of them. Histograms have to do with intervals. So if you're dealing with intervals, you would use a histogram. Let's continue. Draw a dot plot or frequency table to display the data. So they took all the information in this table here and they displayed it on this dot plot. Okay, so they started with a table, they've created a dot plot, and as you can imagine, we're eventually going to make a histogram. The data on the student travel times vary from 5 minutes to 60 minutes. So the students that got there the quickest, it took them 5 minutes, and it took one student an hour. That was the longest time it took for a student to get to school. Why is the number line on the dot plot labeled every 5 minutes instead of every minute? Well, I think we know that answer, right? Doing a dot plot from 0 to 60 by 1 minute intervals is going to be a really, really long line, right? That's why sometimes we need intervals. How can you identify the data values on the dot plot when the number line is labeled every 5 minutes? In other words, what do I do with these dots that are kind of in the middle? In other words, they're not at 5, 10, 15, 20. Well, I can either estimate, or what I can do is I can kind of go back to the table. It looks like I might have 2 7s or 2 8s, and I see over here I've got 2 8s, so I can tell that, oh, these 2 are 8s. Step number 2, determine the frequency of the data values that fall into each interval or group of consecutive numbers. So you'll notice that there is a blue square around these dots, and it says the values between 20 and 30, including 20 but not including 30, are grouped in the 20 to 30 interval. In other words, if we wanted to show or display this data in terms of data points every 10 minutes, this is how it's grouped. You include the 20, in other words, you include the lower value but not the upper value. Do you guys notice how on this blue square from 20 to 30, they included the dots that are in the 20, but look at right before the 30, this square ends, so they're not including these 3 dots. The values between 40 and 50, including 40, but not including 50, are grouped in the 40 to 50 interval. So again, 40 to 50 interval, how many dots are in there? You got it, 0. It says the height of each bar of the histogram represents the data of the number of data values within a specific interval, a group of consecutive numbers. So again, in this case, down here, they're looking at the number of dots within a 10-minute interval, and up here we looked at how many dots there were within a 5-minute interval. Let's continue. And remember, guys, if this is a little bit confusing, remember I'm going to do a problem with you, okay? Step number 3, draw the histogram. The histogram below has an interval size of 10 minutes. So you'll notice it's 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, and 60 to 70. Okay? Now, how is a histogram like a bar graph? How is it different? Well, how is it alike? They both involve bars. How is it different? With histograms, you're looking at intervals, not just individual numbers, and you'll notice that the bars that are next to each other are connected. In most bar graphs, these bars would be separated, wouldn't they? How can you use a dot plot or frequency table to help you make a histogram? Well, we just showed you how to do that, right? These are your intervals here, right? 0 to 5, 5 to 10. These are 5-minute intervals. Down here, they change them into 10-minute intervals when they group them in these squares. What does interval size mean? It means the number of minutes between each bar, right? So in here, it's every 10 minutes. Using the same data, what would a histogram with a different interval size look like? That's a great question. And we're about to answer that right now. So if you have not done so already, let's get our notebooks out. 4 1/10 A. We'll do number 1 together. It says in the histogram above, the data are grouped into 10-minute intervals, right? Every 10 minutes. The data could also be grouped into larger or smaller intervals. Sometimes changing the interval size of the histogram helps you see different patterns in the data. So it says A number 1. Make a histogram that displays the time travel data. Use an interval of 5 minutes. Now, do I have to go back to the table? Do I have to make my own dot plot and do everything over again? Luckily, the answer is no, because we have a histogram, we have a dot plot that's already divided into intervals of 5 minutes. So we get to use this dot plot right here on page 87 to make a histogram for A number 1. Okay? So here's where students get a little bit confused. But before we do that, let's go ahead and set up our dot plot. Our histogram. So it's going to be the same title. So students travel times to school. And remember, if I'm going too fast, hit the pause button right on the video, catch up to me, and then unpause. Now I'm going to have a y-axis and an x-axis. And remember, my intervals now are going to be every 5 minutes. So I start always at 0. And remember, I'm going to go to 60 all the way over here, going by 5s. So I want to kind of organize my x-axis as evenly as possible. So instead of going by 5s and maybe either running out of room or having too much space, I like to kind of go by the middle. So what's between 0 and 60? Well, 30. So 30 would be about, well, where's the middle? About right here. And what's the middle between 0 and 30? Well, that's 15. That's about the middle there. What's the middle of 30 to 60? Well, that'd be 45. And from here, I'm just going to go by 5. I'll just estimate. That'll be about 5. That'll be about 10. That'll be about 20. That'll be about 25. Then I've got 30. Then I've got 35. Then I've got 40. I've got 45. Then 50. And then 55. Okay? Again, if I'm going too fast, hit the pause button. And once you've caught up to me, then press and then unpause. I need to label the x-axis as time in minutes, so I know that those numbers aren't seconds or hours or days. Then, of course, I also need values on my y-axis. So why don't I just go ahead and keep it the same as the one up here? I'll just go by 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20. Now, if I were to do this again, I probably would have spaced these out a little bit higher because I had more room. But since I'm doing this in pen so that you guys can see it easier, I can't erase. But I still need to label it, so I'm going to put number of students. Again, pause the video if you need to create this graph, and I'll show you how we're going to fill in the data points. Okay, now I'm going to go back and look at my first interval, 0 to 5. Now remember, when you're doing an interval, you include the first number, but not the second number. In other words, I'm going to ask myself, how many students did it take to get to school from 0 seconds to 4 minutes and 59 seconds? Well, what's the answer? None, because the earliest times that students took to get to school is 5 minutes, and I'm not going to include 5. So actually, from 0 to 5, there will be no bar, because again, we don't include the second number. So one more time, the interval from 0 to 5, I include all travel times from 0 to 4 minutes and 59 seconds. There were none, so there will be no bar for the interval 0 to 5. So what does the next interval look like? Well, I'm going to look at times from 5 minutes to 9 minutes and 59 seconds. So I'm going to include the 5, 1, 2, 3. There's 3 students, right? It took them 5 minutes to get there, and I know that because they're right here. I'm also going to include the 6-minute dot and then the 2 8-minute dots. I'm not going to include the 10. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 students that took between 5 minutes and 9 minutes and 59 seconds to get to school. So my 5 to 10 minute interval is going to be 6. So it's going to go just above the 5 line, come over, and then I'll kind of darken it a little bit. Okay, now let's take a look. Again, if you need to pause to fill in your histogram, you can. How many students did it take to get to school at the interval from 10 minutes to 14 minutes and 59 seconds? Well, let's see. Looks like maybe one person that took maybe 11 minutes and then nothing else in between. I can confirm that here is only one time between 10 minutes and 14 minutes and 59 seconds. So connecting to the previous bar, I'm going to have a very small bar that represents the one student it took 11 minutes to get to school. Now let's do one more because I think you guys get the picture on this. From 15 minutes to 19 minutes and 59 seconds. Remember, I include the 15, right? And by the way, 15 is the mode, isn't it? It's the most amount of people or the most time traveled to school by students. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Looks like maybe 12 students. So I'm going to confirm right now. Let's see, starting here at 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Looks like 12 students took between 15 minutes and 19 minutes to get to school. So that's how big my bar graph will be. I'm going to count one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this bar, again, will be connected. So I'm just going to go just above the 10, and it's going to come over a little bit, and I'll darken it. Just like that. Okay? So what I'm going to have you guys do is I'm going to have you continue building this histogram. Then in A number 2, it's going to ask you to compare this histogram that you made to the histogram up here that did the interval of 10 minutes and ask you what you noticed, how they're different, maybe how they're the same. Then they're going to ask you some questions based on the histogram that you created. And they'll ask you for the mean, median, mode, etc., etc. Okay? All right, guys, good luck with your investigation. You'll do great. Have a wonderful day of learning. I'll see you tomorrow for investigation 4 2/10.